It's loose in the socket because it's a phone, not a camera, so you can just turn the whole phone around. Right, those of you that aren't with us today, my name is Mr. Galindo. Basically, I'm just going to go through more to do with what this competition is about, the main components that make up it, and a bit of a rough timeline, and actually go and give you an opportunity to start working on things today. So, a competition overview. The objectives for today is who runs this competition, for you to learn, what are the main components of the competition, what are the common roles happens in teams, how long does everything take, what does the competition look like, and where to look for more information. So in short, for as far as you need to know, the competition is run by a group, it's a non-profit foundation called Re-Engineering Australia, REA, and they produce and operate the technical regulations and competition documents and run the state and national comps. And once you may be successful with them there, you end up going to the world level, and that's when they're supporting you and putting forward their suggested world team Australia. So the two documents down the bottom, you can see there are the competition and technical regulations. I've got a printout of the tech regs because we use them quite often here in a folder. And basically those are more or less the reference materials, to use a term you'd understand, the Bible for this competition. That's what you use continually and all the time. So if we flick through now, I want to just briefly touch on what makes up everything that you need to do and take with you to compete. So we've got on the board there the car. Obviously, we have to create cars. You've got some large ones in the booth over there, and you've got some on stands down below as well, right? Not only do we have the cars, but we've got the folios. So the folios, I've got two here. Engineering folio. It's basically, as the name sounds, to do with the engineering component of your team. And then you've got your enterprise folio, which is more to do with the team itself, how you come up with the name, the logo, how you manage to get enough sponsors to compete, how you collaborate with different industry professionals. So both of these are extensive, okay? And both of these are very, very, very precise. So we'll talk about this in a little bit in terms of why we do what we do and the way we do it. But effectively, everything is designed and made to fit criteria like a regular task at school. You're being marked on a set of criteria, you've got to work towards those. It's the same with all of these components. There's a marking rubric for all of them. And so the teams, they have spent hours going over those marking sheets to make sure that what they're doing is going to give the best results possible, because what gets you from competition to the next competition is your score. So after the folios, we have the booth. Obviously, you can see the booth there. The booth is basically a place that would be your home base in a comp, and also for you to present your sponsors, give them an opportunity to have return on investment. You've got your team identity, you've got your prototyping and development stages, and so on and so forth. Verbal presentation on the board, as you can see behind me, is one of the major things that you have to do in the competition, and it's something that you'll get a lot better at, and it's a really, really valuable skill that students learn. I know Team Perspective really loved all the time we spent on the verbal presentation at the national comp, but it is, I haven't prepared much other than the pictures on the screen to give you. I haven't written down a script. I haven't planned anything other than giving myself some prompts visually, and then I just talk. And that's the level you get to, kind of thing. Verbal presentation, miscellaneous bits in terms of what doesn't really fit into an obvious product you've got to make. You've got all the marketing that goes on. I'm wearing my jersey today, or my team shirt from Horizon they made for me, and then also all the collaboration and innovation. Now there's more to it than that, but effectively these are the major components that you would need to work on to go to a competition to be successful. And obviously with that collaboration and innovation is your sponsorship. So then what makes up a successful team in terms of individuals? In terms of individuals, these are some common roles. And like I said, it says commonly used, not necessarily the best. We've got team manager, probably the most critical role. You can imagine that they are in charge of making sure that everything is being done on time. Okay, you don't want to get to a couple of weeks before you leave and realize you haven't made the car yet, or your wheels don't fit on your axles, or all that kind of testing should be done by the engineers, but sometimes the engineers forget, so they need someone to remind them, have you double checked that the wheels and axles fit together? Have you made the car yet? What's the timeline? And we'll talk about timelines in a minute. You've got your design engineer, as the name suggests.
team manager should be also knowledgeable about everything.
Correct. They need to know everything that's going on in the competition and in the team. So they're kind of the person who is the go-to person for asking questions, and also the go-to person for teams to make sure that everything's running smoothly. And I would expect them, because I work most closely with the team managers, to be asking you what you've done, when is it going to be done, and writing you like a teacher gets on your back about getting things completed on time. Design and manufacture engineers, sometimes this might merge into one role, sometimes it's multiple people. The design engineer or the manufacturer engineer generally kind of share the roles around coming up with innovations to do with the car, though the whole team can contribute to that, then designing those innovations, researching those innovations, and testing those innovations. Compared to the manufacturer engineer, or the role of manufacturing, which is more to do with the actual making of the car. If we look at the world's team Horizon now, who we've got Luke and James, both of them are just written as engineers, and the reason for that is because, Sam, you don't need a pen, trying to get students in the shop. The reason for that is because those two students, they shared that more or less. They both spent time designing, you know. They could talk to you about the individual bits they did individually on the cars. And then if you look at the manufacturing of it, it wasn't just one person who made it. Luke spent more time actually getting the codes done for the machine and running necessarily the machine, I'd say. And then James definitely got, though he's looking at me unbelievably, spending a lot of the time actually sanding it back. So they share those kind of things. And I'm just using it as examples, James. So very critical, those two components. Industry relations, now I've written industry relations, it's also just general community relations. So in terms of the different things that make this competition successful, you have to find enough money to go, okay? The shirts, they cost $35 each minimum, right? And everyone needs to pay that. Or you find a sponsor that will pay for it for you, and that's after you've got maybe some discounts already to get cheaper shirts. You know, all of the printing that's done on that booth, first of all, had to be designed. Then it had to be made up. Then the team had to learn how to actually design for the printers to print it. And they had to collaborate with those printers, talk to the printers about how they could do that. Would they be willing to print all 4 panels, you know, or 3 panels and a poster there? Or would they only do, for the state competition, you know, 2 panels? Okay, so that relationship that we've got with them, you know, I would be saying that the industry relations person needs to make sure that they are working with that company to give you what you need, right? Booth engineer is more or less the person who is in charge of producing the booth. Now, all of these are in flux. You don't have to have specifically those roles, and I think there's a lot to be said for changing and merging them. In fact, I think realistically, it could be very easily the role of the engineer to design the structure of the booth, right, for the team. So if you had 2 engineers, a design and a manufacturer engineer, or just 2 engineers, they could come up with the structure of the booth while working with the team on what they thought was best, but someone else could just do the graphics. And so instead of having a booth engineer specifically, you could have a graphic designer instead. And in fact, that's probably really critical, the graphic designer, because so much time and energy goes into being able to be represented properly in your shirts and in your folios and everything else, so everything looks neat. So some common team roles, some common team tasks that we've gone through. Timeline-wise, to understand more about this, basically a lot of these things you'll be working on as much as you can and for as long as you can. So for example, the car, you know, if you are in a real F1 team, and they'll tell you this, they'll be working down to the last day or 2 to get the final parts made, because they could have done more testing and more refinement the longer they've got. Even if their car's in the pit lane ready to go, they just put on the newest part that they've come up with. And the same is true for our teams here, except for the fact that they need to make sure that they actually make things with enough time to produce them. Now, if you're in a real F1 team, you might have a whole lab of manufacturers that will make something in carbon fiber and send it around the world to wherever your competition is. But for us, we have to make sure that's done with enough time to actually produce it at school before we leave, like when we go to the nationals, and the same with the booths. Putting the folio together. In terms of what needs to go into the folio, you need to have been working on that and making notes of things, taking photos of everything you're doing, the different businesses you go and talk to as you go, to make it a lot easier. There's 2 folios, enterprise and engineering there. Booth, I reckon it takes about 8 weeks to go from idea to producing it, if you're quick, okay? Cutting up the materials and stuff and testing the fit of everything, that takes a bit of time. Just deciding as a team whether or not you want to have angled side panels there, right? How long did that take, Horizon?
Too long.
Too long. a couple of weeks at least was wasted on that decision, right? Was it wasted? They came to a good, result at the end, but, that process takes energy, it takes a bit of time to do. So giving yourself enough time to do that is really important. Verbal presentation, it would be great if you could spend more than 3 weeks on it, but realistically in 3 weeks you can nut it out and get a pretty good result if you're going to put the energy in. Miscellaneous bits, marketing, that takes the whole time of the competition, okay? These guys, Horizon, for example, and I'm talking about them a lot because they're just a good current example that we've got set up in the room. They've got a website, they've got Facebook, they've got Twitter, they've got Instagram, okay? And somebody, the media relations person, is managing that and working on that and putting up posts quite often, right?
Yeah.
So between James and James, I think you're getting at least 1 to 2 a week at the moment on Facebook to go out to all the people who have liked and followed them. And so that's another thing you'll be marked on. So, and I'll answer questions in a second. What I want to look at now is just quickly the timeline. The school-held finals, the due date for that, I'm still waiting to find from REA when we will actually be cut off from registering to go to the state finals. But that will be when we have our school finals. And basically, once you guys form into teams in term 2, we will look at a lot of the work you've done digitally, rather than having to print it all and spend money on it so much, and see who's going to be the best shot going forward to the state competition. Now, if we've got 2 development teams and they've both got enough funding and sponsorship plan to go forward, that's fine by me that they both go forward. But if we had 6, I'd say we're probably only going to take 2. So there's a bit of refinement there that goes on, okay? What does the competition look like? It's probably not a bad idea to watch those World Finals videos, but I'm conscious of time. So I'm going to remind you that the link to this set of slides is down the bottom there, and it will be in the video that I put up onto Daymap. And also I'll be making a program website for you guys to look at. Looking at our BSS timeline, like I said, their team creation is in term 2, student organisation around then. At the moment in term 1, it's all about the interest and understanding how the program works, which is why we're doing so many lectures so quickly. And obviously there'll be video recorded so you can catch up or watch them if you miss one for whatever reason. Student organisation into teams hopefully will happen around term 2, and then we'll have in-house finals just before we go to state finals, which will be somewhere in late term 2, early term 3. Further information, and this is where I want to actually take you to now, is from REA, because they're the competition organisers, it's all on their website, and the documents for competition and technical regs. Then also, teacher and mentors are really, really critical. Once you guys form into teams, it would be my suggestion that you guys basically create or ask a previous student to be a mentor for your team so that you've got someone you can ask about how it works. Now, I've already queued up a number of previous team members for that and talked to them about their role. Mainly, though, we're focusing on those students who have already gone all the way to the world comps because they'll have the most experience to give you. But there are about 6 or 7 kids in the school at the moment who have gone to a world competition. And then, Brighton having such an illustrious history in it, obviously there's about 20 to 30 kids outside of school, part of the F1 alumni group, that can also help. So where to look now, and what are we going to do for the next couple of weeks? Well, I just want to show you these links. REA.org just updated their website. It's good. It's also a little bit less easy to find things in, so sorry if I'm getting in the way, but I wanted to try and avoid more people. Effectively, what you've got there is the website here. You go to the right-hand side, you've got the menu, obviously. And if you go for students and teachers, that's where you want to head, because that's where you can then select what some of the programs they run, such as the F1 in Schools program. Selecting that, we then go through and we've got information about what the competition is, and then you've got resources. Now the resources, it's just low down on the page. Oh no, it's on a new page, this one. You've got loads of stuff here, and you've got links. So to start with, for example, we've got guidelines in terms of if you wanted to create Facebook pages, you can't obviously use some logos, and you can't call yourself an F1 in Schools team. You have to call yourself certain things because they're trademarked. But realistically, what you want to be looking for are these, the regulations and the competition regulations, and I'll show you them in a minute. You've got the scorecards there for cadet teams. You've got the scorecards for professional, and you've got the scorecards for development, and I'll explain what those are in a second. And then you've got other things to do with consent forms, examples of portfolios, marketing materials, and supporting documents. Now, the one I wanted to show you here was the project management guide. This is a really good guide for team managers, people who want to go into team management role, to have a look at, because it shows kind of the way that you might go about organizing your structure. So it looks like this. You can see here, this is for Fibal. It's a few years out of date, so not everything is quite as accurate, but it still has a lot of relevant bits to it. For example, having a project objective, understanding where the constraints are, understanding the products and deliverables you've got to produce, some of which we talked about today, creating a strategy, creating a schedule, understanding the stages, creating a project budget, looking at the roles and responsibilities, who your stakeholders are. Then you've got the technical management side of everything. So, you can flick through this and see lots of that kind of stuff, planning considerations. Some of the key ones, though, is having a simple schedule that has, when you're starting, say, the designing of the F1 car to when you're assembling your prototype race car, okay? And so they've got dates there. You've got the different major stages, original estimate of rental hire or facility hire for when you're actually competing, travel expenses, things like that. This is a good document to have a quick flick through if you're interested in the management role. Okay, so what is marked in the competition? Now, this is the competition regulations. It's the orange one. If we zoom down a little bit, we can just find basically the point allocations, C3.7. Basically, this describes all of the different major components that are marked. You can see here there's a few, and they're all valued differently. So you've got specification judging. You've got your engineering, as in your CAD design, the manufacturing prowess, and then the design process, documentation. So, some of these are outworked in your folio, your actual portfolio, the design of the portfolio, then your marketing, verbal presentations, and the racing. And so that's how they mark that. I want to just remind you of the fact that there are 3 different streams for actually competing, and I'll maybe even tell you my suggested structure for that. So effectively what there are cadet, development, and professional teams. Cadet teams basically make one car and a couple of A3 posters, and that's what I would suggest year 8s are probably interested in doing, especially if you haven't competed before. So there you go, cadet, development, professional. You're also limited with numbers, so cadet can only go up to 3. Development, you have to use like the cars over there on the stands. The fact that you've only got one set of wheels that you have to use from REA, so you're limited and you can only machine your car from 2 sides. If you don't understand what that means, ask, but basically limits what you can make. Professional then is 3 to 5. Now usually these are kind of distributed along age groups. Cadets, as I said, I'd go, stop recording, or time, we're nearly done. In terms of the age groups, cadets I'd say year 8s to year 9s probably, if you really don't want to make a fully fledged team. Developments, I would say up to year 10s potentially, but realistically I'd say that's for year 9s as well. And then the professionals is like year 10s and year 11s and stuff, because you've got to remember that when you start this comp now is not when the national or the world competition, if you're successful at the state level, is. States is this year, next year is national, so you'll be a year older already, and worlds is at the end of the year. So if you started this in year 9, then you'll be in year 10 if you get to the national competition. So I hope this has explained a few different components for the competition a bit more. What I'm imagining that you guys might start doing this term is attending these lectures or watching the lectures as they come up, trying to find some people that you think are going to be interested in maybe forming teams, understanding what you want to try and do. Okay, what role do you really envision for yourself? Are you more interested in graphics, or are you more interested in being a collaborative, innovative person to do with business, working with industry? Do you want to be doing the engineering? All these different roles, right? You need to identify what you want. In that, I think it's also a really good idea for everyone to do the My First Car project. And so the My First Car project, I would suggest coming in at a couple of lunchtimes when we're not doing the lectures and just having a go at following the videos and making a car on one of the computers. It takes maybe 7 to 8 lunchtimes if you're working really hard, if you've used CAD before, and if you haven't used CAD before, it will take a bit longer. So if you haven't done that before, I would really suggest doing that. Other than that, questions, please ask myself, Miss Golding, who was in here but then left, she had a yard duty today, and Mr. Barrett, of course. Mr. Hudson is also another teacher who's going to be looking after teams once we form into teams. Hope that's helped explain a few things. Yeah, hope. Nodding? Cool, I got nodding. All right. If you've got any questions, like I said, just ask. Other than that, thank you for coming, and I'll see you next Thursday.